Um, if we, unless there's any questions or any comments from anybody, we can go ahead and get started with our webinar today. Again, I'm Shawn Fasier here from Pinnacle Health Informatics, and today we wanted to talk about getting value from your data, as you can see on your screen there. And getting value from your data is important, and I'm going to kind of examine this from the viewpoint of data sources and the extract, transform, load process, the ETL process, and how there's a rich ecosystem of data in your world, and by taking advantage of that, you can get value from all that hard work you've put in to build the systems and build the infrastructures to assemble that data. And as it says, you can gain insight and value from all your data sources, and it will provide a clearer picture to you. Again, if you have any further questions or you want to get in touch with us, you can always go to our website there at phidw.com. So back in 2017, The Economist had an interesting cover that I've kept close at hand because I think it's interesting. It talks about how data has become the world's most valuable resource. There's a lot of resources out there that are valuable, and oil traditionally has been that resource, and it still is extremely valuable. But data may be arguably the world's most valuable resource. And with all the electronic systems and our interconnected world, we are amassing oceans of data. Even the smallest agencies have access to a lot of data that they can use for decision making and for performance monitoring. And as the quote there says, analytics is the force that drives change across organizations. So agencies that embrace their data, that use all of their data sources, have a much greater ability to be agile, be flexible, take advantage of opportunities, and to note exceptions and make corrections. And so using data effectively is extremely important, and it is a competitive advantage that we can use in our business and in our healthcare practice. And of course, change has been greatly accelerated. And now with people working remotely and with telehealth on the rise, it's more important than ever that we track our data, that we look for our data sources and bring all of those in that we possibly can, and combine them and look across them and look for patterns and trends that we may not have seen, and then manage from that data. So today, I just wanted to present a short agenda. I wanted to talk a little bit about the planning of a data project, and that really is something that we sort of give short shrift to often. Often it's just, hey, I need a report that looks at this. Well, that's fine, and that's common, and we need to be able to accommodate those. But the best data projects start out with some planning and some foresight, and putting down on paper some specifications that the team agrees to, and determining the rules. It's very important to ask the right questions. We tell a lot of our clients, we can get you the answers, but you've got to give us the question, right? That's the hard part, is coming up with the question. What are you trying to ask, and what do you want to monitor and investigate? So the next thing we're going to touch upon is extract, transform, load, and that's an extremely important part of the process, and it's also one of the most challenging parts of the process, because you have to make sure that you're looking at data in a way that makes sense, and that you can combine the data, and that you have a proper understanding of how the data sources interact. We'll talk a little bit about those data sources in depth, and we'll talk about effective visualizations, and then the importance of iteration and feedback. As you go through this process, you'll build something, you'll get feedback, you'll modify it, and most data projects are an iterative process, some over many years. And as opportunities and exceptions present themselves, you can modify your project. So again, on the project side, you need to identify the questions the data will answer. And sometimes this is hard to do. It's hard. People intuitively, your coworkers or your staff intuitively kind of know what they want. They have sort of an inkling about it, but we need to kind of get down to the brass tacks and identify the questions we're trying to answer, and where that data lives and how we need to extract that data. We want to define success. What will success be? Is success just getting a report into the state on time? Well, that's successful. That's a measure of success. Or is it, hey, we really want to monitor our productivity and get more productivity so we can see more clients. We want to utilize our resources better. We want to know if we need to open a new branch or a new agency location somewhere. Do we need to close an agency location? Do we need to move providers? Those are the kind of things we need to define. What would be the measure of success for this data project? We want to look at cost per service. We want to bring in our GL data, things like that. And then of course we need to create the rules and say, what data gets included, what gets excluded. In productivity, this is always a big deal, because it's, what services count, what services don't count. How do we want to do that? So we need to define these rules. What would be a goal? If we have a productivity goal of 50%, well, that needs to be something we bring into the data project, and so we can always compare what we're doing to this goal, and it lends itself nicely to KPIs and to colorful indicators as to what's going on. We're going to look at some of these a little bit later, and that'll help us design the eventual output of our project. So the more time we can spend kind of planning, the more successful it will be. And to that end, we have a dashboard and specification sheet that we often use for our clients. And it does seem kind of laborious on the outset. End users are often like, I just need a report that does this. Well, let's talk about that, right? Because often if we just try to make a run at a report, or a dashboard or some data project, oftentimes it comes back and it isn't exactly what somebody may have wanted. So this is a sheet that if it's used, it's very helpful. I've highlighted some sections here. This is something that if anybody wants a copy, just let me know. Send me an email or raise your hand during the presentation, or give us a call, and we'll certainly get a copy of this out to you. And I'll send it out in a Word format, and you can modify it if you need to any way you want. I'll just send it out as is. But as you can see, we have the name of the dashboard. We have the narrative description here highlighted. Just how would a person describe what we're going to build in just common terms? What tools are we going to use? What are we measuring? What dimensions are we including? And that's a little bit of some data speak, but it's kind of like provider, agency, location. Time elements. Do we want to look at it by fiscal year? Those sorts of things. Sorting, drill down. Then I have marked here data sources, right? So what are the data sources, right? I mean, do we need to get into the GL system? Do we need to go over and pull a spreadsheet off the Google Docs out of through their OData API? Do we need to have a process built that pulls a spreadsheet off an FTP site? Is there a web service we need to query? Is there an API from one of the vendors? And so this is where we'd start talking about that ETL. Oh, we don't really know how, we don't really have payroll information. Well, we're gonna have to go get that out of our payroll system. Okay, where does that live? Well, we have to download it from a secure FTP. All right, well, let's build a process to do that automatically. And so we have that data at our fingertips. Budgeting information, where's that kept? Oh, that's on a spreadsheet. All right, well, let's go get that spreadsheet. Let's import that. There's a web service we can query, our position control system, and get our agency hierarchy, all those kinds of things. Really important to identify where that data lives. Again, do we want to look at trends? We want to look at goals. Again, that's highlighted. What's the goal? If you have a dashboard and it doesn't really have anything on it to tell people how they're performing, then it's much less useful. And so by using this kind of a form and going through it and getting agreement and buy-in, um, the data project can have a much better start and eventually a much more successful finish as well. One thing that always kind of catches people and that sounds funny to them is I say, well, just sketch me something. Just sketch me something on a piece of paper. And people do that, and it helps tremendously. And they just scrawl it out maybe on a piece of paper. This is where I want the client name, and I want a little gauge here, and I want a little chart here. And they think, oh, that's not useful, but it's extremely useful, because then we can look at that and say, hey, we can match that, or you can match that in your efforts, right? So if you're doing this on your own, you can say to your end users, yeah, just sketch me something and show me what you want to see. And that's usually very helpful. So with specifications in hand, and that can be a process that can be lengthy, but it yields results. You're ready to talk about your extract, transform, load. And this can be as complex as you want to make it. We have processes currently that look at several data sources several times a day, pull data on intervals, clean the data, stage the data, pull it into reports, refresh reports. But if you decide to go down this road on your own, then there's the most common tools out there. Of course, SQL Server integration services. That's a huge one in the world, with the ubiquity of the SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server platform. That's very mature. There's lots of third-party integration tools and a lot of built-in integration tools, and that can be sometimes referred to as SSIS. The official name is SQL Server Integration Services. And if you own SQL Server, you should have a license for that already. Now they do have the cloud version. You can integrate that into your system if you're going with a fully cloud-based system, and that would be your Azure Data Factory. And that's kind of the cloud version of the integration services. And you can build your integration services packages and move them to the Azure Data Factory and move data around and integrate data into different systems. Amazon has their own system, and there's many others, right? There's lots of other tools out there for extract, transform, load. Things that you're going to want to think about are data frequency. How often you're going to be pulling this data. Is every day frequent enough? Every hour? Do you need something that gets pulled on a triggered basis? So if somebody adds a certain service, or if something happens in a database, does that data pull automatically? Can it be once a week? Just all depends, right? And all of these extract, transform, load systems can accommodate those sort of intervals. And of course, data quality is an important thing. So do you allow bad data into your data warehouse and then build quality assurance reports to identify that bad data? That's what we probably see more often than not, is clients say, oh yeah, just pull all the data in and then we'll write a report and we'll fix it, and then when the data warehouse builds, the good data will come over, the corrected data. Sometimes clients want to have rules that block bad data and send it to some kind of a log file, and so then they just go check the log file and they can fix the data that way. So data quality can be as complicated as you want to make it. You can have rules for data length and data types, and very, very sophisticated rules can be implemented on the ETL side. So it's something that you need to give some thought to, and how you're gonna bring that data in to the system. So that's an important aspect as well, is the extract, transform, load, and to become proficient in a platform that works for you. We work mostly in the SQL Server integration services world, and that's a great platform. But again, there are many others as well. So And make sure, just as a note, if anybody has any questions or anything, please feel free to raise your hand or send a question in the Q&A, and we'll get that answered. And we'll also have some Q&A at the end as well. So moving to the next slide here. So this is a picture from another PowerPoint presentation that we use to kind of show how our data process flows at times. If you see along the bottom there, there's different data sources that, there's a time clock, there's an accounting system, there's SQL Server, that basically that indicates anything that's electronic, right? Any kind of electronic data we can pull in and then bring into the data warehouse and then combine that data. And that's where the real power comes from, is that you can you can now look across processes because you've got multiple ETL processes running against multiple sources. So, and some of the common sources that are connected to by staff and IT staffs that are building projects of this nature. Of course, the big one for us always is the electronic medical record, right? Old ones, new ones. We're on some of our clients. We're still pulling data out of their EMR that they had. It was 3 EMRs ago, right? I mean, they're still having to do things. So we're still pulling data and combining data out of multiple EMRs or electronic medical records at some interval. Another common integration is accounting systems, right? So people want to know payroll. They want to know how many hours a person's been paid, maybe how many hours in a certain program they've been paid. And they can compare how many hours they've been paid compared to how many hours they've produced out of a system. And I'll show a couple of examples of that. But that's a common one. HR systems. Oh, let me go back here. Sorry. HR systems are very popular as well. They keep a lot of data about the employees, goals, things like that in the HR system that they want to have access to and be able to quickly analyze. Position control. So we'd work with position control systems that look at things like how the hierarchy of the agency is set up, and we can utilize that to run reports, right? So we'll look at a report here in just a minute that looks at the agency hierarchy out of a position control system and then runs that report based on who's running it, and they can only see themselves in any direct reports that they have. So those are important. Assessment tools, we're doing more and more assessment tool integration as agencies are able to access that data. Some systems it's built in, but other agencies use online systems like OQ measures or maybe a hosted DLA 20 or some other tool, right? And the agents, these other organizations often will provide to you like an API or something to get that data, so you can now pull that data in. And so we're working on several of those all the time. But that's something, if you do that yourself, you should talk to your vendors and find out and talk to your different data applications and find out what sort of systems they have to pull that data. Emergency room admissions, that's the collective medical data. So we're doing more and more of that all the time. And that's really nice because now you can pull that admission data from like collective medical, combine it with your other data in your data warehouse for services, and it's a very powerful combination because you can now see how the clients are doing out in the community with their admissions to the emergency departments. A lot of spreadsheets, a lot of data is in spreadsheets, even online. So Google Sheets, we do a lot of work with Google Sheets and with agencies, and they maintain like a shared Google Sheet somewhere, and then we can pull that OData feed in. And again, those are things that are available to you. If you ever pursue this on your own, you can get on Google and look at their specifications and how to pull those spreadsheets. A lot of software vendors provide APIs you can query at any interval. That's very common. They pull data down as some, everything from a CSV to a Java, a JSON file that has to be parsed out. Then of course, web services, right? A lot of vendors use web services, and you can pull that data through web services and get the WSDL, that WSDL file, and from the vendor, and it'll describe the web service and what data you can pull. So it's really, this is part of the investigatory process, talking to your vendors, finding out what they provide and how you can get that data out of those systems. Because once you can get it into your system, and you can build those links between those data sets, that becomes very, very powerful. It's much more powerful than just one system, and you can really start to gain a much broader view of your activities and your systems. So that's data sources. So this is an example. This is just a picture. This is one from a vendor. We just asked for the entity relationship diagrams. And so if you're lucky, you'll get something like this from a vendor, and they'll say, hey, there's our, this is just a little piece of a much larger Visio diagram. But, you can get in there and see all the data and the types and the joins. And this is very computer friendly, right? It's not human friendly. And so the hope is you can extract this data and then present it to your users and your report writers in a much more human friendly format, in say a star schema data warehouse or something. But gathering this type of documentation is always useful, and asking your vendors if they have anything like this or any sort of documentation that can help guide you in your process is always useful. That's called an ERD, or an entity relationship diagram. And that's part of just, like I said, asking your vendors for that sort of stuff, and seeing if they can help you out. All right, let's see. So again, we just want to touch upon a little bit of more on integration. So, use your vendor contacts, find out if they have specifications for integrating data, data maps, entity relationships, web service definitions. Those are all highly useful in planning your data strategy. So again, this is kind of the part where all the data kind of flows together, like on a road, right? So you have a picture of a freeway interchange there. Well, that's kind of what you're hoping to develop, is some kind of a data interchange, right? A data hub where data can live and be accessible, and this data source can leave, and then this new data source can come in, and it doesn't disrupt your whole operation. So you can move data sources in and out as needed. So, okay, so then we talk about getting the data, staging it, integrating it together, and that's not a trivial step. But the payoff is that you have a system that you can build that will give you access to data, so you're not spending all your time hunting for data, or you're not spending all your time manually trying to join bits of data. And the payoff is you can come up with a story that people can understand, right? And human understanding is such that if you give somebody a big old spreadsheet, it really doesn't make much sense to anyone, right? A human brain can only process about 6 or 7 lines of data at a time, or columns. And after 6 or 7 lines, the data just kind of blends together. And so we're not really designed to crunch, just big wide spreadsheets or big crosstab reports. If you know the exact data you're looking for, those can often be interesting, but it's much better, I believe, to summarize data visually and then provide drill down into the details. And if you have all this data together and it's easily accessible, then that's a big step forward. we always encourage people to use a lot of color, contrasting colors. I use, there's a website, I should have put the link here, but there's a website out there. I think it's called Color Brewer, colorbrewer.net, I think. Color Brewer, it's not .com, it's Color Brewer. Anyway, they have a ton of interesting color combinations for contrast and telling two values apart, and you can use those kind of things. You can use colors, indicators, trend lines to communicate a lot of data very quickly, and then point out exceptions and opportunities that then you can drill down to detail. So, design for understanding, use colors, use contrast. Don't use pie charts ever, 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 if you can help it. That's kind of, a lot of people in the data industry are very anti pie chart, but anyway, they're fine if you want to use a pie chart, but they kind of get a bad rap a little bit. So visualizing data, a big one in the Microsoft world, or really in the world right now, is Power BI. Microsoft is putting a lot of effort into that, and it is a great product, and it's maturing very rapidly. And if you have a nice data model underneath it, or a data warehouse, or a data cube, like an OLAP cube or something, makes it much, much easier to build with these visualization tools, like Power BI. SQL reporting services is still a huge player in the world. They've recently updated that. It's still considered a developer tool, where Power BI is not considered a developer tool by Microsoft. It's more kind of just a kind of a visualization tool. So you can do a lot of things with SQL reporting services, and it's not going away anytime soon. And it's very mature as well. Excel is the #1 BI tool, a business intelligence and data visualization tool in the world still, just because it does so much, and people don't really think of Excel like that, but it does a ton. You can do really anything you want, and you can make fancy dashboards, and it's Excel, so everybody knows how to use Excel, right? So it's very familiar. Tableau is another one. There's dozens out there, Sisense, Periscope, but and it's, people get these packages and they just start dragging and dropping, and that's great, but really this is the end of the road, right? After you've gotten your data, you've designed everything, you make sure your data is good, and people have all of the formulas and all of the data they need inside the data model, then they can more easily start building these visualizations. So with that, I just wanted to kind of go through a few that have kind of a few visualizations that sort of illustrate this process that we've been talking about. And again, please, if anybody has any questions or wants me to go over anything again, please don't hesitate. So, so this is a project we did for one of our clients, and worked with them. They actually did a lot of the visualization work, but this pulls data from at least a couple of different systems. It pulls data from internal OData sources. I think that it's Google Sheets that they maintain. It's pulling data from I think maybe even the New York Times data set that they provide. It pulls data from a EHR system, and it very succinctly helps them track COVID screenings at their agency. And this screenshot's a little old, but it's been interesting to see how over the course of the pandemic these numbers have changed, and they have changed substantially. But again, I could show you a big spreadsheet and it wouldn't really be that interesting, but now you can start to see, oh my goodness, here's out of work. Oh wow, that's on the increase, right? We're doing more screenings, we're doing less screenings. Oh, the screenings that we're doing, we're seeing more asymptomatic positives. And so by putting this data together, it lends itself to a better outcome on the visualization side. And again, a lot of work was done in the background before this kind of a dashboard or visualization was ever performed, so, or ever built. So let's see, here's another kind of, here's one that it was a provider productivity, and they wanted to compare just what I was talking about earlier. You know, they wanted to look and say, hey, I want to see, you know, a trend line on my productivity. You know, what's my productivity look like? So I blocked out the provider names, but you can kind of see a trend line here, and that's their productivity. And the hope is you'd see that raising and getting better as the providers are using these tools. And then down below it here, we have actually a breakdown of provider hours versus paid hours. So this is from their Dynamics GL system and their electronic medical record. So this is two data sources that are combined. And you can see here that we can look at the numbers, right? The numbers, again, we're not really, humans aren't really good at kind of seeing how the numbers compare. But if we put a kind of a bullet chart over here, then you can see, maybe I have a little laser pointer here I can use. You can see how that compares. The gray is the paid hours and the black is the provider hours, right? So you can kind of see, oh, wow, okay. We need to maybe increase the amount of provider hours that some of these providers are producing, or find out why. You know, maybe they're in meetings too much, maybe they're having to do administrative work that we could unburden them from, or something. But by visualizing that data from multiple sources, you can see that it really improves the understandability. Let's see, another one here. This is one we show a lot. It's been one of our most successful efforts, and we've patterned a lot of efforts after this, but this is one that pulls data from a position control system to get a hierarchy. So this report has to run dynamically based on a hierarchy. It pulls data from an electronic medical record to get productive time. It pulls data from a time and attendance system to get available time. And then it pulls data from an HR system to get yearly goal information for a provider. So this is at least 4 different systems that every day have to pull data and make that data available. And if it's not, I mean, this dashboard in particular gets run thousands of times a day at a specific agency. And if it's not running at 8 o'clock in the morning, and my phone starts ringing. But this illustrates some of the things that we're talking about that you can implement in a project like this if you do this on your own. So if you look at this bullet chart, and again, the bullet chart is a very effective way to express multiple kinds of data together. And so if we look at the gray and the colors match up, this provider was available year to date when this report was run 1,648 hours, and out of about, and the full year is shown in blue, right? So the full year is how many hours that employee would be expected to provide. And so you can see here, you know, this is a supervisor, so maybe they're not producing very much. You can see here that they're available this much, but they've only produced 35.5 hours of productive time. But if we drop down to a different provider, you can see they've been available 1,768 hours, and they've been productive 478.9. But the goal still was to have 1,150 hours, to be 65% productive. And so you can see there's a lot of time they were punched in at the office that they weren't producing anything. So part of the discussion is how, you know, what do we need to do to help that provider become more productive? Maybe they're in meetings or whatnot. Now we can see over here on this part that even though we can see the trends, and we can see that even though this provider is not meeting productivity, right here on the very tip, it turned green. So we know for the last pay period, they did make productivity. So even though things don't look so great, the trend is upward, right? And so maybe this provider is getting better. And we can compare. The gray is, again, the available time, and we see, oh, maybe they had a vacation here. Available time dropped in these 2 locations. Maybe that was some time off. This was the goal. So the goal drops when their at work time drops, the goal drops. And we can see here that their productive time tracks with that. So again, you know, this would be very difficult to run. I mean, you really couldn't do it out of one system, right? This takes 3 or 4 data sources to run this report. And it has to run fast, right? So it can't really run out of production systems that are designed for, you know, for production. It has to run out of an optimized system that you would build, right, from your different data sources. And so with that, you get the results. And this has led to greatly increased productivity at this agency. It's been a real benefit to them. So let's see one more. Oh, this is kind of one we've worked on recently. This looks at a bunch of different metrics: attendance, recorded from appointment, documentation completed it within a day, count of service, count of unique clients served, provider hours, a whole bunch, and it compares this fiscal period to a year ago, or this week to a year ago. We also look into the future. We look at upcoming appointments. Look over here in this section. We compare upcoming appointments in the coming 7 days to a year ago. This helps providers, you know, plan, make sure they've got plenty of appointments scheduled for the coming week. Again, looks simple, and it's very informative, but it took a lot of thinking about the data and where we need to get the data from and how do we calculate the time differences and those sorts of things. And so again, this was not something that we just, you know, developed. It was something that we did after many meetings and many conversations and taking lots of notes. And so as you move forward with your data projects, that's always a big recommendation, that the planning take place beforehand. So those are some examples. I do have one more example. I show this one a little bit in my presentations. This is very old. It's from, oh goodness, 1869 maybe, the year 1869. It's still considered one of the best data visualizations ever. And does anyone know what this is? Anyone want to raise their hand and tell me what this is? Anyone? So this is a graph of Napoleon's march to Moscow in the War of 1812, and the width is the size of his army as he left Paris. So he left Paris with 422,000 men, and as you can see, as he made his way to Moscow, it was cold and they were in war and they fought, and you can see how that bar gets narrower and narrower. They get to Moscow and come home, and they come back and with 10,000 men. So 422,000 to 10,000. And it's still considered one of the seminal and most important data visualizations. And it was done, you know, just with ink and paper, you know, well over 100 years ago, 150 years ago. And but it still it illustrates these concepts of, you know, gathering data, putting it into a visualization that makes sense to people. And so very quickly you get a sense that you get a sense that it's good advice not to start a land war in Asia, right? Isn't that the old line? Don't try to take Asia in a land war. It doesn't work. So anyway, that's kind of a fun little thing that I do show that a lot, just because it illustrates that it's not, you know, we have all these cool tools to use, but it's not really magic, right? It's just a lot of planning and thinking about it and forethought to build a great data project for yourself. So with that, I just wanted to wrap up and again, kind of just talk about the fact that data is more important today than ever, right? I mean, it's really a valuable resource, right? And all of your data sources, not just the ones you think about most readily, but all of your data sources are very, very important. And there's a lot of value that can be gleaned from them. If there's any questions, you can raise your hand or send them over over to us and we'll get them answered. We will have a recording of this up on I think our YouTube channel as soon as it's rendered. If you do have any questions, you can always shoot us an email at info@phidw.com or visit our website. I think there's a form there you can fill out and ask a question. And I'd be happy to give you advice if you have a project you want to undertake on your own. I'd be happy to give you some pointers and point you in the right direction. And any other questions that you might have, I'd be happy to answer. So, and it's been a pleasure. I always enjoy doing these things. We love data at Pinnacle, and we're immersed in it every single day, and it's what gets us up in the morning. And we just love building things and helping people with data. So, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. If there's no questions, it doesn't look like there's any questions right now. And we'll sign off. So thanks everybody for attending. We're grateful you made the time to do so. And we look forward to our next webinar next month. Thank you very much.